Well, hello, everybody. I
Thank
hope
you.
you all are doing all right.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to another episode of Discussions Outside of the Textbook. Oh, I'm joined with my guest, philosopher Dr. James Sikkema. So
Hello,
I would just
everyone.
get started, James, with I was introducing this the chapters that we're going to discuss. Chapters 14, Establish a Private Life, and chapters 19, Be a Patriot. Very interesting chapters. I gave James the choice of what chapters, and these are the chapters, the lessons that he chose. So before we get to that, though, James, you're new to the STC family
Yes.
here since, let me get you my volume up here. There we go. I was wondering if not to put you on the spot, but I was wondering if you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just kind of educational background. Particularly, I just always find it fascinating when I come across a philosopher. It's just such a um, it's an interesting topic. It requires a great deal of discipline. I think much more than even in history of being focused on the content, the concepts, the arguments. What got you involved in philosophy, and why did you want to teach philosophy?
Okay. You cut out for like a good 20 seconds, but I think I got the gist of the question. So
Okay,
what got me into what got me into philosophy? Um, a number of things. So my nickname growing up as a child, like even from being like 4 or 5 years old, was George after Curious George. My parents called me George. They still call me George.
curious, George.
And the
Okay,
reason was I was always going, "What's that? Why? Why is that?" And those questions, especially the why question, and I'm not sure that that makes sense question, um, got me into a little bit of hot water because I grew up in a pretty conservative religious household, and so was um, indoctrinated in many ways to think categorically about a number of questions, concerning God, humanity, morality. Um, but I always had these questions and wasn't given the freedom to pose them. Wasn't given the liberty within my community because of the structure of that community and the expectations within that community to pose those kinds of questions. So I went to university. I didn't really even know what philosophy was, but happened to take a philosophy class and was struck by, like, oh, there are other ways to think about things, and you can pose different all these questions that I found meaningful to me throughout my life. So it lit a fire under me to be inquisitive, as I always was, but to inquire further and more deeply into a number of problems that were meaningful to me. Um, Chief of which was, the question of, like, well, who am I, and what is real, and what is my place in reality. So then, yeah, I thought teaching philosophy. I mean, when I was studying philosophy, it didn't really occur to me. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't think that far ahead. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan A or plan B. It was just this was meaningful to me, and I pursued the investigations I found meaningful to the point where I finished with a PhD and then said, okay, now what? And I was always of the mind that philosophy is practical. It has to be about how we live our lives. It has to be about informing who I am and what I do in this world. So teaching was certainly a natural extension, but I do a lot of work in the community as well. So I do a lot of philosophy with children, other public educational and works, and a lot of ethics consulting outside of the academy. So but yeah, teaching was a thing that I thought one of the main impulses and motivations was uh, there's folks whose freedom of thought, of expression, for whom the question, what if, or is that true, for whom it doesn't occur to them and they don't get to ask those questions, or they're not given the space and time to make those kinds of investigations that are absolutely central and foundational to being a human. And I thought like there's a moral imperative to wanting to create the space and cultivate the kinds of intellectual virtues that philosophical investigation involves.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, what came to mind as you were talking about your motivations to get into philosophy is one of my favorite American philosophers, Henry David Thoreau, who is famous for saying, the bulk of men live life unconsciously.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think that is, I remember walking into my first philosophy class. I think I took three between being an undergraduate and a graduate student. And that was probably one of the first times where I was like, oh, this is what it means to be a human being.
yeah,
And such, I think the dynamic of a philosophy course or just reading philosophy, discussing philosophy is it begins to kind of tear at cultural, political institutions and showing them for what they are, as these constructs that can blind us of what it actually means to be this living creature here on this planet
yeah.
for
I
space
think
and time.
that certainly was my experience, and I think the experience of doing philosophy, it's deeply unsettling. We have a tendency to want definite and determinate answers, or to be shown what we ought to do. Just tell me what I need to do. Give me the instructions, and I'll follow that. Um, but then we delay these questions, or we suppress these philosophical questions because they unmoor our position. They undermine the what we take to be bedrock. And with a simple question of why, or are you sure that, or does that make sense to say? All of a sudden, we're thrown into confusion, and what we thought was solid ground becomes it becomes liquid, and we find ourselves swimming and trying to find some dry land to hold on to. But the feeling of the philosopher is to get comfortable in the uncertainty, to get comfortable in the open-endedness of the questioning, while yet venturing to give arguments and to give good reasons for why we think something might be preferable to, or constitute a more warranted belief than its competitors.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember having a thought in college of this is sort of like a psychedelic experience. And the older I get and the more I learn about actual philosophers, especially the one that you specialized in, Spinoza, it's actually not even a safer psychedelic experience. It can get you in a lot of trouble, as a lot of philosophers have, uh,
Yeah.
Spinoza. Um, but okay, excellent. Well, let's get into the topic at hand here, on tyranny. Timothy Snyder's text on just basically warning Americans and helping them prepare for living within a totalitarian regime in which we find ourselves in. The first chapter, establish a private life. And so while we were frantically trying to get you to be part of the conversation with the technical issues, I was pointing out that this is, I think, a very interesting lesson that he provides, particularly for probably a lot of our students who probably don't know what it is actually like to have a private life. Um,
Yeah.
I remember the first time I clicked a what I thought was a word processor, a computer that my mom had just bought. Hadn't seen her for a few years. I was just coming into town, and she's like, "You have got to see this thing. It's called the World Wide Web." And she got that sound it used to make, like, doo, 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 doo,
Yeah.
that it took a while for it to load up, and then the page took a long time.
Yeah.
And I
Just
wasn't
beautiful.
impressed. I was just like, what? Okay, whatever. I'm gonna go touch some grass. Um, and then I remember as it became a little bit more user friendly, and I think it was around the time I started college, and even that it wasn't. I even had a my first one of my first classes. I had an instructor ask the class, "Does anyone here have access to the World Wide Web?" Because some of the stuff in the course is going to be within the World Wide Web. Um, so I got into the internet out of necessity. And
Yeah.
did you have any experiences with those chat rooms?
No, I've always been a fairly low tech person. So
Okay,
like I
you're a
never
good
played
man.
video games growing up.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
never really appealed to me. So
yeah, prior to social media, there were these chat rooms where people, what you could have like hobbies or just interests. Whatever, and you'd be able to chat with people all over the country, all over the world. And when it first started, people would use pseudonyms and all of that. And I remember being in a chat room, and there was a person there that had their picture of themselves and was using their real name. And I remember clearly, like typing to that person, going, "Are you sure it's safe to have your picture and your name out here on
yeah,
the internet?" And I forget what he said, but he didn't seem to be too concerned about it. But I mean, that is such a an antiquated concern these days, but I think it's
yeah.
still a very valid concern. So with
It,
that said, yeah, yeah, what are your thoughts on this lesson?
yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of the most important values that has been devalued in the last 20 to 25 years. I remember like growing up, the idea of privacy for me. So I'm gonna link this to my experience growing up in a community that engaged in modes of surveillance and that refused to allow for the cultivation of a private life, and then link it to the experience that we have today. So and to foreground this, I want to say two things. So the first thing is we tend to think of privacy in terms of the information that we have about ourselves. And Snyder is in this way saying, okay, make sure that your password protected. Make sure that you're not that you don't have too much exposure of that information because nefarious actors could be using it for surveillance purposes. That the surveillance state that has been implemented since the Patriot Act, at least, if not prior to that, is more and more interested in eroding the privacy that you ought to have about your information, whether that's about personal information, things that you do, how you go about expressing yourself in writing on the World Wide Web and elsewhere. So there is something really important about protecting information and maintaining privacy about that. That is, so in terms of rights, if you have a right to privacy, that means that you're making a claim on others not to intrude upon your seclusion. That it is your discretion. You are the one that has the power as the claimant to annul that right to certain others. Like, so Sean, I might say, hey, I'd love for you to, check out this essay that I wrote. And I give you permission to access information that otherwise would be private. It would be, only I have seen it to this point. Same thing with passwords, with banking information, with your footprint online. Uh, there is so that and that's really serious. And I think what Timothy Snyder is saying is in a tyrannical shift that can be used as leverage against you. The more information people have on you, the more that they can use that um, to keep to monitor you, to keep track of your whereabouts, to keep track of your modes of expression, with whom. So all of these freedoms that we have in the First Amendment of, of belief, of opinion, of association, of expression, those can be mined, surveilled, monitored, and potentially subverted. And I think Snyder is right to say we've got to be more mindful of that. For digital natives, like many of our students today, and millennials just recently prior to our Gen Z students, privacy in that form was thought to be an expendable value. It was, I'm willing to. It doesn't. Who am I? What does it matter who's looking at this information? What, if I liked a recipe, or if I'm sharing information about my sexual proclivities on a chat with that I think is closed. Or if I download an app and I quickly go through the privacy policy, and what third parties are going to gain access to my information because I want to play Candy Crush. And we don't read that fine print, and we go, well, for the sake of ease, a lot of students will say, I don't mind that I have individually tailored ads, that I looked at boots on Amazon and now I get ads for more boots. They go, I wouldn't even have known I liked those boots if they hadn't been tracking my activity online. So for ease and for comfort and for ease of engagement and interaction, we're willing to go, yeah, you can have access to this information. And I think Snyder is right to say, hold on. That's assuming a great deal of goodwill on the side of those who are obtaining access to that information, be they governmental entities or corporate entities, which in 2026, the distinction is becoming increasingly blurred. And this is no more evident in what has come to be called surveillance capitalism. So for our listeners out there, if we don't know what surveillance capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff made a deep dive into the shift that occurred, especially with Alphabet, which owns Google. But it happens with Meta, who owns Facebook and Instagram, that there's data that we put in, when we search something, and I might have mistyped something, or if there's an auto suggestion of for how this sentence that I started should be filled, I might choose the third one as opposed to the second, or I might be the kind of person who doesn't use autofill at all. Let me finish my sentence, damn it! You don't know what I was thinking. All of that information, turns out, is getting recorded. It's getting deposited in data centers. And for a long time, Zuboff showed that information was just discarded. It was, they're called digital breadcrumbs. And we thought, well, we want the slice of bread, not the crumbs. Those crumbs, they don't amount to much. They go off to the wayside. But people began to see patterns in those in that residual data, and could gain a pretty good picture of the kind of person you were, based on your online behavior. So they could form a better and better picture of you based on your frequency, repetition, habits, modes of communication, etc. And they began to sell those to third parties, organizations that that might want to sell you something, or other people that might want to have that kind of information about you, to say, okay, you're the kind of individual who might be persuaded by this kind of argument. We've noticed that you've been, increasingly, joining far right chat groups, or an Antifa, or an Antifa chat group, whatever it is. And they sell that information into, from the capitalist side, from the economic side, to a market called digital futures. So they're predicting behavior based on all this information that you're unwittingly giving to all of these corporations that have an eye on your online behavior. So Snyder is saying this is a really important value, privacy. It's actually a right, and rights are like rights are more than just values. They're these sort of principled, these first things that both structure how we ought to interact with one another, and what we expect from government and other entities, that they don't overreach and infringe upon this value, this claim that we have. Hey, what I do is up to me. What I'm doing, I if I don't know that I'm being watched, I think that I'm engaging in an activity that about which I have control over. I am at liberty to conduct myself in the following ways. If I'm unwittingly being surveilled, being watched, being observed, and not just being observed, but also having that information be used eventually against me, in the form of, and this gets to the second and I think more fundamental concept of privacy, is when we think about the freedom of belief and opinion, that the way that we never thought that the way that we express ourselves, seemingly being issued from our own agency, that my thoughts are my own, my beliefs are what I've assented to, that the judgments that I make are maybe considered, or this is what's unique about me. That those very mechanisms of belief formation are increasingly also being manipulated, engineered, and we're susceptible to and passive to the machinations of others. Okay, that concept of privacy is more fundamental. James Rachel's, the philosopher, writes an essay on the value of privacy, and in it he highlights that the more fundamental concept of privacy, and what's so important about it, is that what privacy gives you is the ability to become a self. That you have the space, free from the undue intrusions of, manipulations of, indoctrinations of others who might want to determine that selfhood for you. They don't give you that that space to cultivate a sense of self. What do I truly think about this? What do I truly believe about God, or what I ought to do in this world? Okay, so go back to my childhood. That was a childhood without that, in many ways, without that primary sense of privacy. Growing up in a religious community that demanded lockstep conformity, you weren't at liberty to cultivate your own sense of self. It was you need to engage in those kinds of activities, assenting to certain forms of belief, forms of expression about those beliefs that the community prescribes to you. And certainly what that does give us is a sense of belonging. I'm an integral part of a larger whole. and that confers identity on me. This is how this is going to connect to patriotism too. So that I get a sense of identity by belonging to a community, but in exchange for that security and that unity as being a part of a larger whole, I as an individual become obscured. I don't have I don't have the liberty to, I don't have the space to, I don't have the claim that, hey, I ought to be able to pose a question. I ought to be able to take what you're telling me and subject it to critical scrutiny. The private person gets to do that. In the religious community that I grew up in, that wasn't permitted. In our political community of today, with the advent of surveillance capitalism, and widespread, the widespread surveillance system that we live in. I mean, it's not just in terms of capitalism. We surveil each other, right? What the sort of knee-jerk reaction to things happening is, let me get my phone out and record. I am participating in my own servitude. I'm participating in and cultivating the absence and the erosion of privacy. I don't want you to feel that you are private. You're all the assumption now is I'm always being watched. I'm always under surveillance of some kind, whether it's through the aperture of my camera on my laptop, or it's even just when I go to search something on Google, when I'm out in the world, there's cameras everywhere, and even if there aren't cameras everywhere, there's everybody with a camera. I don't have the freedom from intrusion upon my seclusion. I'm not a secluded individual. I am necessarily part of a larger whole, which is true. And yet, the idea of privacy and what's so important to it is that the modes of tyrannical control are very interested in not permitting you a private life. And I think this is why Snyder is adamant. Take that upon yourself. In whatever ways you can cultivate privacy. Yes, in the second form of control information, but as the information about you is even more fundamentally, well, what is it about you that is you? That's that first sense of privacy of can I cultivate a sense of self without the undue influence, manipulation, indoctrination, surveillance of others who have a vested interest in modifying the self that I become so that it's predictable, organized, ordered, open to surveillance. So we can say, okay, this is what this person is about, and we have a picture of them because we've largely created that self.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind after you saying this. One, have you ever read Neil Postman's "Amusing Ourselves to Death"?
I have not
It's
read that. It's
yeah,
sad
it's
to admit that.
Yeah, it's an interesting book because I think it was written in the mid '80s, so it's prior to the internet. But you read it and it's as if he is writing in the internet age. But he brings up 1984, George Orwell's 1984, and Huxley's
Brave New World.
Brave New World. And 1984 is the state is the authoritarian, it's controlling, it's completely infiltrated the private life. Nobody has privacy. And then in the Brave New World, it's all about entertainment and luxury and convenience. And Neil Postman, everybody was all freaked out about, this actually coincides with it's written around 1984. Everybody was freaked out. Like, what is it going to be like after 1984 now that we're
Yeah.
here? And he was saying, we don't have to worry about that at all. It is Huxley's warning. We're doing
Yes.
it to ourselves. So
Yes.
the state, yeah, it's still something to be concerned about, but man, this is an authoritarian's dream here. Just you guys are giving us all of this information. This is a capitalist stream. You're giving us all this information and doing the heavy lifting for us, and now we could truly control you because in the process, you don't know who you are. Another thing that comes to
Mm.
mind is I feel terrible for young people. Full disclosure, I'm a recovering idiot, and that was, and I'm probably,
Same.
yeah. And so, yeah, when you're young, you do dumb things, and you're trying to get to know yourself, right? You got all these hormones going through. You're trying to figure out what it means to be a sexual animal, a person who is interested in people, wanting to cultivate relationships. You get a sense of autonomy. You're not just this child who your parents have been controlling all of these years. And I think you learn that a lot, in your formative teenage years by screwing up around your peers.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to go to a party now. It must be just terrifying because if these things were around when I was at parties, there's no way I would be employed today. Right? I mean, I didn't do anything absolutely criminal
I
or
know,
anything.
but I know what you mean. No, same. I mean, same.
Yeah, so it would be just a terrifying aspect that in some ways, it's probably, I mean, I could see somebody thinking, well, this is probably a good thing. And there are some benefits that we get to. I mean, I think for the first time in history, we now believe people, populations, demographics who say that there is a problem of police targeting us and using extra legal means to control us. When I'm thinking of the Black Lives Matter movement, I remember those conversations. Oh, it can't be that bad. And then George Floyd happened, and people were, oh, it is that bad, right? We just witnessed a guy clearly intending on murder somebody. And so we get that benefit of we can also have surveillance on the state, but um, the ability to, as you were pointing out, to really, especially when you're young, to really cultivate who you are is being greatly constrained because you are always looking over your shoulder,
Yeah.
wondering who exactly am I? And you really can't express that, and there's no environment to make mistakes. The other thing
Yeah.
that comes to mind that drives towards, I think, Snyder's concerns is I think a lot of people, I think, and you were touching on this. Well, I'm just kind of, I'm just clicking on things that I'm interested. I buy things on Amazon. I'm not doing anything that's going to get me in legal trouble or in trouble with the authorities. Well, the reason why Snyder is writing this book is, well, here we are, and the definition under the current administration of a domestic terrorist has been broadened, right?
Hmm.
Um, I am a domestic terrorist according to the new definition because I value due process, right? I question not the existence of capitalism, but I do question some of the underbelly of capitalism. And then I have some concerns, even though I go to a Christian church, I do have concerns about particular expressions of Christian theology. If I express any of that stuff publicly, and if I'm putting myself out in the community and I'm making any kind of trouble as far as challenging authority, um, and it might not even be in a way that is, I'm the front face leading it, just showing up to a protest, um, um, getting involved in an organization, right? Or just somebody has problems with me. These kinds of things can have really dangerous implications as we are seeing across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a frightening reality, but it is nonetheless a reality. And I think uh, this is why Snyder is so adamant on including becoming more and more intentional about cultivating a private life. and making sure that that your footprint, especially your digital footprint for us, I mean, is more and more minimal. Because with the certainly with the broadened definition of domestic terrorism, the threat is real, because it's more open to subjective interpretation of whoever happens to be sitting in the court that day, depending on their ideological leaning.
Mm-hmm.
And which goes back to the forms of tyranny that are becoming apparent to us now are that the state has a vested interest in the ideological affiliations of its citizens, whereas according to the Constitution, it ought to, unless it's undermining the very founding principles of the public thing, the Republican form of government, implemented by and founded on those basic rights and freedoms, it ought to be content neutral about those various commitments. But we're increasingly seeing now that the state is making definite and determinate judgments about the kinds of ideological commitments that it deems either American or un-American, which is a very, the great philosopher Noam Chomsky says, is the most undemocratic notion. He says no other democracy has a notion of being un-American or anti-American. I think that leads to that point of be a patriot.
Yeah, let's get to that. This is interesting because the very concept of what it means to be a patriot is worth talking about. It can be very subjective, and I do very much appreciate Snyder's distinction between patriotism and nationalism.
Yes.
And
very often mistaken for one another.
Yeah.
And currently being mistaken.
Yeah, and basically there's a lot we could say about those distinctions, but nationalism, I think, concentrates what is in the national interest based in political and economic institutions and for individual advancements in claims of power, where what Snyder makes the distinction of patriotism more in line with, I think, enlightened philosophers' values, universal values, right? To be a patriot, to be an American patriot, is to recognize I have rights, and since I have rights, even people I don't understand, I don't agree with, they have rights, and no matter my disagreements or my lack of understanding these people, those rights need to be protected, and it's not just that, but we need to have a society that is deeply committed to human flourishing,
right?
Which is, I think, a nationalist is not interested in.
Not certainly in the broader, more foundational and based notion of what would constitute human flourishing. It's a particularist. So the nationalist is a sort of particularist patriot. It is, what it means to be an American is something really definite and determinate in terms of the content of one's consciousness, not necessarily one's character. So a lot of nationalism is going to be either ideological or ethnic or both. So you have ethno-nationalism or ideologically motivated nationalism. I think what you're seeing in America today with right-wing Christian nationalism is that there is this sort of ethno-European form of nationalism that this nation, what made it great was the contribution of specifically ethnically European folks who maintained ideological affiliations and commitments to broadly Christian ideals, which is a strange thing to lay claim to when Christianity, at least on a more fundamental level, preaches love of neighbor as self, as an extension of your love of God. This is really what Spinoza, you mentioned Spinoza earlier, this is what he means by piety, that citizenry ought to cultivate piety, and that piety ought to be based on that central command: love your neighbor as yourself. But before we get there, there's an uneasy relationship between privacy and patriotism. It's not obvious that if there is to be privacy, that patriotism is going to be of value at all. So this is a question that Alistair McIntyre, the virtue ethicist, he writes an essay called "Is Patriotism a Virtue?" From that more enlightened, so he calls this into question. You mentioned the enlightened philosophes that sort of serve as the ground of the fundamental commitments, that get expressed in the Constitution. If patriotism somehow means being principled and it being based on, well, I have regard for, admiration of, respect for, and will gladly be numbered among those who call themselves American, only if it adheres to either aspirationally or foundationally and institutionally in its core commitments and values. So it's contingent, that form of patriotism is contingent upon the independent, the capacity for private cultivation of those kinds of reasons, those kinds of commitments to, like, broad humanitarianism, broad welfare. Are we actually meting out the kinds of rights and freedoms that the Constitution identifies equally to everybody? So it's one thing to have political liberty. It's another to have equal access to it, as John Rawls rightly points out. So, but the patriotism, the appeal of patriotism is the very thing that I experienced as a young person. Is conferred upon you identity as being a part of something bigger than yourself, and the ground motive of of patriotism becomes affiliation, and increasingly becomes about lockstep conformity to content specific forms of, in this case, what it means to be an American. And when that happens, there's a blind loyalty to, a blind affiliation with, a blind trust in the nation about whom someone has patriotic fervor. That's a really dangerous thing, and McIntyre points that out. At the same time, though, he says, well, but it's not true that each of us can simply say that, well, I have come up with my values and my principles in a vacuum. That the values of the aspirational values of America are uniquely American. And there's something about that we think is worthy of protection, promotion, and to make provision for their increasing realization. That's sort of the America is a task, not a finished product. I think for that other form of the blind loyalty patriot, America is this monolithic structure that must be maintained no matter what. Then you're at the problem of the worst, which says nothing new in, nothing old out. It's about conservation, maintenance, conformity is the condition of community. Love it or leave it is a nice sort of expression of that kind of patriotic sentiment. But I think the other form that McIntyre ultimately appeals to, and that other philosophers who question the value, the virtue of patriotism, will say a principled patriotism is one that says, yes, I am yet a member of my community. I do have special affiliation to, in this case, America more than I do to, to another country. And that's not necessarily morally problematic in the same way that I have greater love for my children than I do for a stranger's child. Do I still want to make provision for the protection and promotion of their fundamental rights, their freedoms, increasing their welfare as much as possible? Yeah. That's what the principled American patriotism would look like. I want to pay my taxes to make provision for public education. Because even though my children are no longer of school age, I want to make provision for the stranger, the neighbor. It's an expression of love that we are part of something that is bigger than ourselves, but it also has to be based. It has to be predicated on some more fundamental values. I think this is what Langston Hughes is talking about in his wonderful poem, Let America Be America Again.
Mm-hmm.
Should I brought it with me. Should I read
Yeah.
some?
Oh, please. It's a beautiful poem.
So I think this is the kind of principled patriotism
And
that
real quick,
only,
just for real
yeah,
quick clarification, who Langston Hughes was. He's a
yeah,
poet from Harlem. It's during the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s, 1930s. Langston Hughes has a profound influence on Dr. King
yes.
when he's doing what he's doing in the 1950s, 1960s. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, Langston Hughes is one of America's greatest authors, I think, and I think um, what he has to say here combines the virtues and the right of privacy. This only issues from the principled patriotism, only issues from someone who cultivates a private life, in the sense of I have access to, I've provided myself, I've cultivated for myself the ability to critically evaluate, to raise a question, to get at something more fundamental than what I might be being told on the surface. You've got to do this if you want to be one of us, if you're going to be an American. Don't throw the country's reputation into the garbage. This is what a lot of the reaction against the critical studies, either critical race theory, which I think is a total aside, has its problems theoretically, but that's beside the point. But the idea that the reaction now of like, well, I don't want my kids learning that, the nasty stuff about America. They should have pride in their country. Well,
Mm-hmm.
pride, pride ought to be earned. It ought to, be balanced with shame. And there's so much shame in this country, and we ought to be truthful about it. Obscuring that truth or suppressing it in order to accentuate, well, what makes America so great? There's no greatness about that. There's nothing great about that. Go ahead,
Let
Sean.
me,
Sorry.
yeah, this, I think a distinction needs to be made in a conversation about patriotism. And this can come off as a semantic kind of conversation, but I try to point this out to my students, these words that are sometimes used interchangeably: country, nation, and state. It's
Mm,
important to understand the distinctions. Country, well, let me start with state. State is the government, right? Or political power, economic power, right? Uh, Country is the land, right? The mountains, the streams, the rivers, the deserts, uh, and nation. I think that's the most important thing that we need to understand. And I think this is what
Mm,
you're getting at. The nation is the people. And so
yeah,
for people who say, no, this is what America is, and you better fit in this box or else you're against the country. No, no, no,
yeah,
I'm not against the country. I love the mountains. I love the deserts.
yeah,
I'm against state policies or practices or cultural things that are impeding the
yeah.
nation, the people.
Yeah, the very ideological foundation of this state. I
Yeah.
think there's an institute called the Bill of Rights Institute, and they do a really nice job of educating these sort of civic virtues necessary for and complementary to the rights and responsibilities of citizens of the United States of America, of the state. And I think this is the thing that Hughes is getting at here. And so this is coming from a black man in the Harlem Renaissance, someone who has certainly borne the brunt of one of the most offensive forms of dehumanization in racism, is borne witness to immense cruelty, immense hardship through marginalization, identity erasure, uh, you know, the tyranny of the majority. So he says, and yet he finds the source of a principled patriotism in this way. So I'm going to read from this poem: "Let America be America again," which I mean it's so different from "Make America Great Again." Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love, where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark, and who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker sold to the machine. I am the Negro servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry yet today despite the dream. Beaten yet today, oh pioneers! I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years, yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream. In the old world, while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings, even now. In every brick and stone, in every furrow turned, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down where we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me an ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America! Oh, yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangsters' death, the rape and rot of graft, and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. That is just, obviously it got emotional. It's just beautiful.
No, me too. It's
because it says the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. It's an expression of, I mean, it's right out of the Sermon of the Mount. It's we are all brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And it really is a dichotomy of two visions of America. And this is a thing that I think that's really hard to appreciate. You've got the Enlightenment that is developed in Europe, and it's somewhat constrained because it is expressing these universal values of rights, of dignity, the worth of the individual within a very much established society of hierarchies, standing armies, kings. And those words, those thoughts have no place there.
Right.
But those thoughts, those writings get transported to colonial America. And in colonial America, there are no standing armies. There are no kings. And yet those words are still threatening to the developing hierarchy, racial hierarchies that are developing in the colonies, political hierarchies. They are not institutionalized and fixed. And this is what, let me bring this in here. Share, and how do you do this? Where did it go? There we go. This is a quote I often share with my students when we studied the American Revolution. Benjamin Rush, one of the least known founding fathers, one of the more admirable founding fathers. But he says, there is nothing more common than to confound the terms of the American Revolution with those of the late American War. It's a great distinction because, yeah, we often conflate the American Revolution was the war. He's saying, no, that's a part of it, but actually a small part of it. The American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. On the contrary, nothing but the first act of the great drama is closed. And what this was a warning to his compatriots, the political elite, because that's the almost the schizophrenic nature of the American Revolution. It was a top-down revolution,
right,
of people who were like feeling affronted by this authoritarian regime as they saw it, Great Britain, and they borrowed this philosophy that claimed that rights are universal. They belong to all brothers and sisters, no matter what, no matter where you're born, no matter when
Right.
you're born. Uh, but yet they are controlling institutions, slavery, right? A patriarchy that necessitates people to being subjective so they can maintain power. And what he's saying there, what was he saying in this quote here is buckle up, right? You guys,
Yeah.
it's not that we've uprooted the very concept of hierarchy. Hierarchy is very functional, right? We work at a place with a hierarchy. But what he was saying is we've uprooted the very concept of essential hierarchy.
Right.
Something that for those that are unfamiliar with that term out there, there's something essential about me. I'm white, I'm rich, and therefore, and I'm a man, therefore women are subjected to me. If I'm a slave owner, black people are subjected to me. Why? Because of how I was born and what I
Yeah.
look like and who I was born to. And Benjamin Rush is saying, and it's reflecting on what Langston Hughes is saying, that is the vision of America that's truly going to realize what enlightened philosophers, what the Stoics, what
Yeah.
Jesus was trying to say in the Gospels. That is how we get there, leveraging this historical accident that is America.
Yeah, I mean that's a amazing addendum to this poem. I think that's the central task and also the central irony of America and tension in the history of America is was this what Nietzsche would have called an incomplete nihilism, right? So the idea is or if the revolt is against hierarchy in terms of the king and the chain of command all the way down to the serf, um, if we want to upend that and enlist enlightenment ideals of equality, individuality, liberty, natural right, um, but but in many ways structurally it maintained the same form as the monarchical system it replaced, whereas ideologically it was saying no, like that's the whole thing has to be rewritten. It's a page one rewrite, as far as the nature of political authority, of the legitimacy of it, that it's got by means of the consent of the governed, that it is a fiduciary power, is still something that we have not fully realized because of the elision of economic interest with political power that never really went away because it was indeed a top-down revolution, even though ideologically it was a bottom-up revolution.
Yeah,
And I think that's the tension when Langston Hughes keeps saying America was never America to me, but it will be and that's the this task. But the means and the mechanisms of control um, keep have this capacity to keep that from being realized. And I think that's what Tim Snyder's book is cautioning us, and especially today with uh, with big tech companies eliding with state power. It is the possibility of the kind of private life and the kind of principled patriotism is at risk. It's under possibly greater threat than at any time in this nation's history. And we're celebrating 250 years in July this summer. And it's a watershed moment. I think it really is, where we have to decide Are we going to opt for the kind of principled patriotism that says, let America be America again, or the particularist patriotism that says, make it great again, and we mean something definite and determinate by that? And then anybody on the outside of that can't be an American. Whereas at its foundation, as a land of laws, as predicated on natural right, on the equality of liberty, it runs completely contrary to any form of particularist patriotism, uncritical patriotism that says my country, right or wrong, loyalty to this entity. And I think this book by Snyder, in its simplicity, and how it sort of methodically plots through and says, this has happened before. We'd be foolish to think we're immune to it. No, in fact, yeah, we're probably more susceptible to it by the very values that can be co-opted to curtail themselves if power is given to those with a vested interest in maintenance of control.
Yeah, and I think it lends itself, because I think what Snyder is also pointing out is for those that think or claim or have a belief that they are patriots, and maybe you have some insights from this being Canadian, recently coming to this country. That's what I'm assuming. I know you're from Canada, but is this working at South Texas College? Have you just moved to the United States?
I've been in the United States a bunch of times. I am an American citizen.
Okay.
My dad is an American citizen, and raised
Okay.
as an American, even though I spent a lot of time in Canada. But yeah.
Yeah, what I'm curious about is expressions of patriotism. Do you see a difference? Because it's not uncommon in this country to see flags, to people seen wearing shirts of flags, to having slogans, don't tread on me, home of the free and the brave. There's this constant expression of America, we are free, we are free, we are free. And it kind of just reminds me of somebody who's some sort of gym rat who's constantly explaining how strong they are and showing people how strong they are, which is always a tell that you aren't that strong, actually, right? Are we really that free if we have to remind ourselves we are free all the time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is ironic for sure, and it's
Is
yeah.
that something that happens in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, Canada is a strange nation. I mean, historically, Canada is in many ways um, an arm of the British Empire and British companies, the East India Company and
Hmm.
others. So Canada, Canadian patriotism tends to be negatively defined as tend to be like, well, we're not like the Americans. So I think there's that sort of brashness that Canadians find a bit um, a bit on the nose. So there's more of a sense of like, be humble. At least like the Canada that I grew up in, the kinds of things that Canadians value is certainly hard work. Be a good member of your community, help each other. Certainly Canadians are known for politeness, but there's a sort of deferential attitude to um, it's for the sake of the greater good of the community where we're willing to pull together. It's less of an individualist ethos, even though it is a democratic state that has its own Bill of Rights and own civil liberties. But those, interestingly, like even within the Canadian Constitution, there's the notwithstanding clause that can curtail or reduce or suspend those liberties under certain circumstances if it's in the national interest, and that was demonstrated in recent years during the pandemic. So, but Canadian patriotism is in many ways. Um, a bit, I think prior to the truckers movement, uh, and prior to Donald Trump saying that he wanted to make Canada the 51st state, I think you saw there was a form of Canadian patriotism that emerged when its sovereignty was threatened, where it said, no, like there's the sort of the rejection of absorption into the American Union as a catalyst for for a Canadian form of patriotism. But again, I think it's more negatively defined.
Yeah, that was interesting.
For most of Canada's history, it's quite happy to be a colony of the British Empire, and
Okay.
most of its affiliation is to the British Empire, especially in the major provinces like Ontario and British Columbia. Obviously, Canada's unity is always a question because of its bilingualism and multi-faith foundation. So you have largely Catholic and French-speaking Quebec that's colonized by the French Empire, and largely Protestant and English-speaking rest of Canada, but primarily Ontario and British Columbia that aren't. So its unity is in question for a number of years. But really, like from the British North America Act signed in 1867, the impulse behind that was American expansionism. It was, well, they're going to expand, and the British Empire has vested interests in the resources in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, not to get into it, but yeah, the claim that Canada might become the 51st president.
State.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the state. Sorry, that is actually not new. There's been plenty of examples of American hostility towards Canada, but yeah, I don't want to get too much into it because we are getting towards the end.
Yeah.
I want to see if students out there, anybody out there, any questions or comments in the last 10 minutes of our talk on this, on these two lessons, which, gosh, sometimes, James, I think some of the lessons that we've chosen before, it's like, yeah, an hour and a half was good enough, but I'm finding that, man, there's room to talk about this for a lot longer, but an hour and a half is what we have.
I think the fundamental tension between privacy and patriotism is a difficult one to square. I do think that the idea, the possibility of a principled or a reasoned patriotism is got by means of cultivating the right and the value of privacy. But that's that very right to privacy that has been eroded for the sake of greater uniformity and greater security. And even for the most frivolous of reasons of greater comfort. And there certainly is comfort in an unquestioning and that becomes an unyielding loyalty to an affiliation with one's country, one's nation. But if it also entails trotting over and curtailing or unequally distributing the very rights and freedoms that America is founded on and aspires to more greatly realize, then it's, I think, a misguided patriotism. It's and it's misaligned with what a principled person, who has a sense of integrity, and I think you can only get that from having a cultivation of privacy. Integrative autonomy is this notion of like I have a sense of myself, the beliefs that I hold, for what considered reasons, the values that guide me, upon what principles, what are the habits that I engage in for these, that form my intentions and do that repeatedly over time. This is why I make these kinds of decisions. That's, I think, the kind of nation, at least aspirationally, America is hoping to foster that kind of individual. It requires a civic education. It requires the cultivation of civic virtues, as well as character and intellectual virtues. But that's the very thing that increasingly both the state and corporations don't want to cultivate. They don't want to place you the possibility of individuals coming to their own conclusions and having their own sense of self, and what guides their decision making. They'd rather they'd rather inculcate and cajole, if not coerce, individuals into adhering to ideologically preferable commitments that can be easily controlled, surveilled, and repeated.
Yeah, I think it comes to a quote. I'm going to read this quote here in just a little bit, but I think it requires an examination of actually what power is. Uh,
Mm,
and I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's a quote I often share with students, or frankly, anybody who will listen these days. Dr. King made the distinction, and he actually lambasted philosophers, particularly Nietzsche, for separating power and love, right?
mm,
And he said, no, true power is an integration of
yeah.
love and power. And basically, he was saying that power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and
Mm,
anemic. And
mm,
so, uh, if we truly want this nation that honors rights, those of us that want that aren't in power have to really recognize that we cannot be shy of power, because when he, in the context of what he was saying, that this is kind of shortly before he was assassinated, he even expresses frustration. He stops in the middle of this quote and he says, "Guys, we have to get this right." And he's looking at
mm,
these disempowered people going, "You guys are shy about claiming political power, but if you lead with your hearts, the outcomes will follow. So don't be afraid to open up your heart and to claim the power for yourself, for your community, for your family, and writ large for the national community. So we can, as he put it, save the soul of America." And
wow.
when he said that, he invoked Langston Hughes' poem. I thought I would get towards the conclusion of our talk here, share a quote from the father of the Constitution, who had his problems. He was a slave owner after all, but nonetheless, I think uh, he was a person who kind of just was born into that. But I think he understood the problems of this. But he writes. Basically what he's writing here is to the concerns of the anti-federalists. But anyway, here he goes. "I go on this great Republican principle: the people will have virtue and intelligence to select men of virtue and wisdom. Is there no virtue among us? If there be not, we are in a wretched situation.
Mm,
No theoretical checks, no form of government can render us secure. To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is I always screw that word up. I'm going to screw up this quote here.
chimerical.
Chimerical idea. Thank you,
Yeah,
James. Which is basically, just it's nonsense,
yeah,
right? There's
the
this
fiction.
crazy idea that if we're just, and this is the problem of, I think, the distinction Snyder is making between a patriot and a nationalist. The nationalist looks at the American flag, they look at the Constitution as just symbols. It's as if, as Alan Watts once put it, they're going to the restaurant and eating the menu rather than the food that is being served them, right?
Yeah.
It's all wrapped up in symbols. Yes, you can get a good feeling when you just think about the Constitution. You can get a good feeling when you see the flag waving in the air. But if that is the only thing that you get from it, just the symbolism of it, you're missing the point. right?
Yeah.
The point is to go, well, how do I realize that? And it begins with one, being vulnerable, opening up our hearts, and being vigilant about looking around at our brothers and sisters and going, how do I be of service to them? And in the context of our times, how we be of service to each other is one, cultivating this private life so we can navigate this world with dignity. And so when we are in the public life, we can truly look out for each other. Um, so it becomes this flourishing society. Um, yeah, any last thoughts from you, James? Any last comments?
Oh, no, I don't know. I think I've expended all of my intellectual capital for the
Well, I'm glad you're here
need
because
a
I have very
nap.
little capital to spend myself. And anyway, yeah, students out there, if you're looking for a good philosophy class, look up James Sikkema. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It'll be worth your time, and take him in person. Don't take a philosophy class online. It defeats the
No.
point. All right. Thank you, James. I appreciate it. And
Thank you
oh,
so
wait,
much.
whoa,
This is great.
sorry, guys. I'll stay on for